Welcome to the Great Things LLC podcast, the show celebrating inspiring people who are making an impact in the world, creating conscious businesses that are in alignment with their own personal values. Each episode shares the wisdom, experience, and intention of those that are following their dream, visionaries that have chosen a different path, found their purpose, and create joy and abundance while helping others. Whether you're already a trailblazer or still searching for your own path, these stories will inspire you towards being the best version of yourself. Welcome to the Great Things LLC podcast. I'm Josh Meader, your host, and today I'm really excited to share the story that Stephanie Graves is bringing forward because I think it's going to land and resonate with so many people out there, from being highly performing, highly successful, doing everything, the mom, the family, the work, to what a lot of people find is a quick path to burnout and impacting your health. And in Stephanie's story, she's going to share that and what she's come through, how she's come through, and what she's doing today. So first off, welcome, Stephanie. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Yeah, so Stephanie and I and her husband, Ryan, met several years ago at a wellness workshop and just had a really great connection. Two fantastic people, lovely parents, and just really found a good connection. And since that point, Stephanie, I've followed both of your adventures, and let's set the table a little bit for the audience here. Share where you came from, from the physician's assistants, the successes, the challenges you had, and what kind of really brought you to the point where you had to make a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you're correct. My background is as a physician's assistant, which I practiced for 11 years. And initially it was very rewarding. And I really felt like I was making a difference helping people, particularly in my first job. I worked in surgery. So that was pretty much like instant gratification. I was seeing what I was doing right before my eyes, helping people. As time went on and as I had children, twins, and then a son, my priorities shifted. And during that time, I was also struggling with my own health crises. And I felt like I was just being bounced from provider to specialist to nutritionist, and no one was really taking the time to listen or to help me or to do any of the deeper work that was really needed to uncover what was going on. They were just merely treating the symptoms. All the while, too, as I mentioned, I was starting to have some professional disenchantment, if you will. As I was going through the ringer as a patient, I saw on the other side how patients were just it was like a wheelhouse being brought in and out as quickly as possible. So I knew there had to be a better way. And being the high achiever, I guess, or maybe even a little bit stubborn person that I am, I was unwilling to accept that I was just going to be on prescription meds for the rest of my life. So I explored a different avenue, and a friend first introduced me to functional nutrition, and instantly I was hooked. And I enrolled in the coursework, and I completed 2 levels of certification, and then I started implementing it not only in my health. I mean, the issues that I was struggling with radically changed. I was no longer living with daily debilitating pain. And then I was given the opportunity to share this knowledge with all of my patients and seeing firsthand the radical transformations that were happening in their lives and giving them their lives back.
And let's, for the audience, so functional medicine versus allopathic in the traditional, because I think one thing people see is like doctors and nurses, they went to school, they study, they know how to be healthy. And it's a difference between functional medicine and your traditional medicine of the West. Could you maybe just help the listeners who aren't familiar with functional medicine as to what that is?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great piece to dive into. So yes, so functional medicine, first, let's say traditional Western medicine, and doctors are wonderful. they are trained in medicine. They are not trained in nutrition. And I can speak from a vantage point of a PA. I mean, I think our nutrition education was maybe like one lecture. So in traditional Western medicine, it's medicine, and it's mainly just symptoms. So you go to the doctor, you're depressed, you get an antidepressant. You have diabetes, you get a medication to treat diabetes. In my world, in the functional world, we're looking much deeper, looking to the roots of what caused your depression, what caused your diabetes, and how can we make shifts to the internal terrain through various diet and lifestyle modifications where the dysfunction took root, the internal terrain, in order to create, real sustainable change. So we're peeling back the layers and more and digging deeper to identify what it is that caused that, so we can treat that. And again, in essence, resolve, their symptom or disorder.
So as I understand it and have experienced in other friends in the field, I think one of the things that just to touch on a little bit is the challenge with almost the psychology of the American public and their approach to medicine, because it's go to the doctor to feel better, to alleviate the symptoms, but you're really not hitting that root cause. So getting into the functional medicine goes deeper, but it is a longer, more gradual and gentle shift, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I often have to remind patients or clients too, for example, you're coming to me for anxiety. It took you 46 years to get to this point. It's going to take more than one visit to feel better, So there's a lot of undoing and unraveling. And yes, what I do is exploring much deeper. So that does take more time to really investigate all of the factors that are influencing disease or symptom expression.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's also not just the nutritional aspect, but the emotional, the spiritual, the entire body, where trauma can come in, can reside in those different things. So it's a more holistic, and I think it's a more intuitive approach that people just innately understand, but it does take some work and some investment in yourself to get there. But let's jump back to your story. So you've been, you found success, you found a path that you really liked. And then there was some disenchantment. You had these things you've gotten now through your functional certification. Where is this now starting to open up to you, where it leads you to today with the functionalhealer.com and the services you're providing?
Yeah. So before the functional healer was officially born, I was still working as a PA. I was homeschooling my children. And like you said, it was a quick path to burnout. I mean, I'd already been burnt out for years, but I got to a point where I just couldn't do all the things, and my PA career was not fulfilling to me. Yes, I was helping people, but on someone else's clock and dime, and I had to fit into a box that I didn't really fit into anymore. So I had to make a really big decision. I couldn't homeschool, be a PA, and start a business all within the span of the same time. So made a really big decision that I was going to leave my super stable, well-paying, with amazing benefits PA career to really just dive into this path and my passion and be able to provide medicine in a way that I feel is most meaningful. So yes, in March, the functionalhealer.com was born. And I launched my website, and I'm currently accepting new clients that I'm working with on a one-on-one basis. And in the near future, I would like to launch a program too, to be able to help more people, because that's kind of where you get stuck with one-on-one. You can only help so many people. And honestly, I just want to help everyone, because there's so much misinformation out there, and so many people are doing it wrong, myself included. I thought I was doing all the right things. I thought I was eating healthy. I thought by running marathons, I was in top physical condition, but in reality, I was not. I was doing a lot of the wrong things. So I'm really just here to educate people, provide them with the information, share my story, and help guide them along the way, because it is overwhelming, and it can be scary to do it alone.
And with the right direction and the baseline, we'll talk a little bit about how finding those baselines, finding where your stasis is. Once that's in place, it becomes building. And going back to making the decision, this is where, I know I'm really curious about
Yeah.
is that is a place where so many people find themselves, in a disenfranchised position in their career, unhappy in their life, wanting to make a change, but sometimes trapped by circumstance and finance and income and all the things around it. Like, how did you get past that fear? What was your support system? Or was it just such a lightning bolt of clarity you had no other choice? I'm really fascinated to see
Yeah.
what got you over the hump there.
Yeah. Well, you know a little bit more about our story than the rest, but for the past 4 years, my family and I, we've basically just been going on leaps of faith. And thus far, it seemed to work out pretty well. We're still all alive and well. So that's kind of where we were at. We also had a really big move too. We moved from North Carolina to Maine. So it seemed like the perfect time to take this leap. But yeah, there was definitely pushback from family. And I think just for fear of not being financially secure with 3 young children, which is understandable. But again, I have a much bigger vision and dream for all of this, and I couldn't do that in the constraints that I was in. And I think more now than ever, people need to hear, the messages that I have, and they need functional nutrition in their life. So I can't just sit back and be quiet about it anymore.
From a small business coaching and standpoint, it's amazing how much the people who love us the most sometimes are, I don't want to say our biggest critic, but our least supportive, because they do have our good intentions in mind and our best interest, but they might just not see the alternative path. Was there anyone in your profession or your career that helped really encourage you along or support you through this process or transition, or did you just go solo and jump off the cliff?
I think I just went solo and jumped off the cliff. Yeah. I mean,
Great.
the doctors that I worked for in my last job were very supportive. And for the most part, they let me practice the way that I wanted to. But again, we did kind of butt heads a little bit at the end, and nothing bad, just the way that they practice versus the way that I practice. And it just kind of got to a point where I just couldn't do that any longer. And again, we were looking at a move. So it just kind of seemed like the stars aligned.
Yeah, well, kudos to you, to Ryan and the family for being able to have that support and that faith to do it, because that's a huge move and want to really acknowledge that. And so now we're here today and your practice is starting up. And when we were talking, what really struck me was your story and how common it is, with those in the high performing roles, those in the parenting roles, those in relationships, all these things coming in from life, and life is a fast pace. So I know you've always cooked well, and you enjoy good food, but even that sometimes is the wrong food for our body. So when I heard it, it's like, oh yeah, do I know anyone who's high performing, high functioning, maybe high anxiety, over functioning, overachieving, struggling with perfectionism? Like, that's pretty common out there. And so how let's start there, because that's from what we discussed, a fairly big population that you have. What do you do with those folks? How do you take that first step and roll back what they've developed over 10, 20, 30 years of lifestyle?
Yeah. Yeah. So for any client, no matter where they're coming in, the first step is to clean up the diet. So it may seem non-important, but, and as cliche as it sounds, everything really does start in the gut. So if you're constantly eating inflammatory foods, and those are in turn sending inflammatory messages to your brain, since your gut and brain communicate very closely, the longest nerve in your body, then that's only going to perpetuate and worsen any of those, ruminating thoughts or anxiety or fear of failure, any of those things. So really and also the biggest thing is meeting people where they are too. So looking at their food journals, Are they eating inflammatory foods? Yes. Okay, let's remove those in a stepwise fashion. If they're not, or once they've done that, then really just looking at lifestyle. And for me, I feel the biggest thing that I did was to drop my body into that healing state. Because when you're in that constant fight or flight mode, that sympathetic response, the same response that's triggered when you're running away from a bear, or if you're chronically stressed because of job, kids, relationships, lack of sleep, under eating, even all the things, the same response is triggered. So really dropping into that healing state. The biggest thing I found was taking things off my list, was removing responsibilities and obligations, and really just focusing on the things that really filled me up and kind of disconnecting from some of those other things. So for example, like I said, I used to run marathons. Now I do yoga and I walk, not because I don't love running, because it wasn't serving me. Because honestly, I was running, looking back now in hindsight, to escape from my reality. So really just looking at the things that you're doing every day. Are they bringing you joy, or are they depleting your energy, or are you using it as, an escape or a coping mechanism? And really just sitting with yourself and exploring what you're doing every day.
It's interesting on that part about change, because I would imagine this is probably one of the hardest hurdles or objections for people, is changing habits, right? We are a creature of habits. Our brains are literally wired to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. And it almost is like a grief process, giving up a relationship that you had. So if you liked your morning bagel, with your cream cheese, and you've done it for 5 years, that kind of creates a loop, a pattern. And so you almost have to go through a grief process of changing habits. And when you're not aware of that, that sneaks up sideways sometimes. But let's talk, I want to just go back a little bit to help kind of bring the audience in on the concept of inflammatory foods, and really why is the food causing inflammation, and how is it affecting your brain? Just to bring people up to speed on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a great point you mentioned before. So one of the things that I do that's very unique is I provide a ton of education in my visits, because again, it makes it much easier to give up that morning bagel if you understand the negative implications it's having on your health, versus just saying, don't eat the bagel, So so there's 4 common kind of groups of foods that are inflammatory. So gluten, dairy, processed foods, and refined sugars. And each of them cause inflammation in slightly different ways. But either way, like I mentioned, your gut and your brain are connected through the longest nerve in your body. And those signals actually go both ways. So anything you put in your mouth sends messages to your brain, good, bad, or indifferent. Vice versa, anything that's happening up here sends messages to your gut. So that can often be a telltale sign too, if anxiety, depression, ADHD, any mental health symptom can present as GI side effects, which is what I was experiencing. Also, interestingly, 95% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So if you're constantly just putting foods in there that are inflammatory, depleting your body of serotonin, that's also going to help, negatively impact how you're feeling overall.
Yeah.
So the first step again is really just to remove those inflammatory foods. And then once we've done that, then it's called clearing the muddy waters, if you will. Then we have a much better idea of, okay, what's really going on in there? What, their main complaint was. Once we remove these things that we know are skewing the picture, now where are they at? And oftentimes just cleaning up the diet can be significant enough for resolution. Certainly not always, but can oftentimes have a big enough impact that, maybe very little is needed elsewhere. if you would
That's what I was
like
going to ask. That was
yeah.
what I was going to ask, because diet, and I found this personally too, is so much. It impacts everything. I've heard the statement, you can't outrun your mouth. So if you're not eating well, there's no amount of running you can do.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've never had the affliction of running marathons like you have. So I've stayed away from long-term running. But the basis of cleaning up the diet, like what are some of the things that are common that you might see with your patients and in your clients after just cleaning up their diets? Is it, more mental clarity, increased energy, better digestion? What do you see typically after the diet's been balanced?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it depends too where they came in at, but yes, loss of abdominal pain, or if they were having cramping or diarrhea, improved skin, no more eczema or acne, improved energy, better sleep, really just runs the whole gamut. So these inflammatory foods, oftentimes the body has to supply its own energy to break them down. And then in return, there's usually little nutrients gained, because generally those foods don't have a ton of the nutrients. Yes, gluten and dairy may have some nutrients, but at its core, whether or not you have food sensitivities or not, those foods do cause increased inflammation in the body. And we know that inflammation is one of the roots of all chronic diseases. So yeah, I mean, it really does run the gamut. And I know for myself, I mean, I certainly abstain from those foods. If I were to have something, maybe I would be symptomatic, maybe not. Now that I've gone so long without them, personally, I like feeling good. So I don't like to take it by chance, but oftentimes people or clients will say, oh, I went out to eat and I had a pizza or something. And that night I was sick in the bathroom, all night long. So, I mean, your body is giving you signals every day. It's just whether or not you're willing to listen to what it has to say, or if you're just going to continue pressing on.
Yeah, for all the expenses and technology we have for medical diagnosis, the body is one of the most accurate in one of the first lines to get that. Your body and your emotional state will be telling you that. And then segueing with the emotional states. So kind of now going into, we've got a clean diet, and there's these other underlying issues of whether it be trauma, anxiety, resiliency, lack of resiliency. What is kind of step 2 in the process that you're guiding your clients through?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, step 1 is definitely cleaning up the diet. 2, like I said, is how can we get the body into that healing parasympathetic state? So dropping down from that survival mode state that so many of us live in all the time, to getting into that healing parasympathetic state. So that could look different again for everyone. Could look like removing things off your to-do list, scaling back on exercise, focusing on sleep, doing trauma work, because the physical body holds so much emotional trauma. So there's obviously various modalities to do so, but doing trauma work, in my experience, has been the most profound healing for me, to really get to the core of why am I anxious, and how do I move through this? So certainly, doing everything functionally brought me leaps and bounds ahead of where I was, and then doing trauma work really just kind of brought everything together for me.
The trauma work, and being familiar in that myself for years, I've always heard the example is, you have your brain and it's the computer, and like computers, there's an operating system, and no matter what you program you slide into it, it still runs based on the operating system. And that trauma work is actually getting into the brain and rewiring the operating system so it performs differently. And a lot of times, whether it be in coaching in my profession or in yours, those trauma wounds, whether they be the 3rd grade where you didn't get the, called for the school chorus, or you felt dumb because of a math test, manifest and come out completely sideways in in unexpected ways. And until you can touch on that place, you're kind of repeating subconscious patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wild too, once you start doing the work to see the stories that have been created over time. And it takes a lot of practice too, to rewire your brain. I mean, I'm at a much better place now with my anxiety, but I do catch myself sometimes getting caught in that loop. And my husband, he's also very much invested in this work. So it's nice to have a support person who can recognize it and be like, hey, Stephanie, I think you might be, in anxiety mode right now. Like, take a step back. So that is helpful. But yeah. And I find that another analogy that I use whenever I was working in practice as a PA before doing my functional training, I used to tell people that treating any mental health disorder is most effective with pharmacology and therapy. Well, I don't really promote pharmacology in that sense any longer. So where I am now, I feel like treating any mental health or, trauma response is most effective through functional nutrition and doing some sort of trauma work, blending those together to really just treating the whole comprehensively.
Yeah, which is a good point. I hope out there is that there's the shift towards understanding that, where there's not one modality, not one magic bullet. It's a holistic approach to physical, emotional, and mental health altogether.
Yeah.
So we're getting into that baseline, that healthy state environment. Now you've gotten your diet under control. We're working through, we're kind of figuring our issues. We're starting to catch patterns in things and becoming more aware of our reaction. Where do we go next? What's that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually at this point, if again, the diet's optimized, we're more in a healing state, would be looking at labs. So I usually don't look at labs right away, not until maybe the third or fourth visit even, and seeing, are there some markers there that are off that could use some shifting up to the functional range to, in essence, also help downstream factors. And the way that I look at labs also is very different than, say, your primary doc. I'm looking at the functional range. So where is it that your, for example, vitamin D is functional? So where is it most optimized versus your doc is looking at the pathological range. So they're looking at, where does disease exist? I'm looking at labs to try to catch it before that point, before you're really ill, and we can bring things back up to baseline, gently that way. So yeah, looking at labs to see if there's anything there that could be shifted or could explain what's still going on. And also, adding on any supportive supplements too. So it's really important to do the diet and the dietary cleanup, and then working on getting out of that fight or flight mode first. Because if you just come out of the gate hot with supplements and there's still all these inflammatory foods and you're still not in a healing state, they're not going to have any room or space to work. You're basically just going to be wasting your money. So there is some work up front to be done before we jump into fancy protocols and supplements and those exotic things I think a lot of people just jump to first.
Well, that's where all the Instagram and the Facebook ads are coming in. This one pill for $100 a month subscription will cure everything that you have. And it's really not the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so now you've really helped someone along. You've identified it. You've done the labs, you're testing, and now you're kind of doing into that stage of fine tuning and balance and ongoing lifestyle. How does that work for a client long term? Because I would imagine, and I know the business is young, so you're not into that level, but like, how do you see helping your clients, be healthy for their lifetime through the different stages of life?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I would like to still see them for routine follow-up if they're, stable, doing well, maybe 2-3 times a year, really looking at labs to track to make sure that we're still on track. Or do we need to adjust anything, or is anything new coming up. So tracking and reassessing. And then that's where, like I said, the programs, I do have doing lots of brainstorming right now on programs that I would love for new clients, and then also existing ones kind of like as a maintenance program that they can follow, through their duration.
All right, so kind of rounding this out a little bit, and there's just a couple other questions that came up. One, so if people know that they're not where they need to be, but what are some of the, say, indicators or the red flags that, hey, someone is in a spiral of inflammatory eating or overstressed environment? What body signals or what are signals are they getting to look for?
Yeah, there's a lot of signals for sure, but the three biggest indicators that signal that someone, is in a poor state or that they would not be in a healing state would be sleep. So if someone is not sleeping, no healing will occur. Sleep is so important. It's these three things are non-negotiables to healing. So if someone's not sleeping, that's a huge red flag. If someone is not pooping, as glamorous as that sounds, that is also a huge red flag. I mean, at its core, moving our bowels is removing all of the toxins from our body. So if someone isn't doing that regularly, that means those toxins are accumulating inside of you. Or if someone's blood sugar is dysregulated, if their blood sugar is just doing this all day long, it's going to be really hard to implement any sort of healing protocol. So those are also three things that to look at when someone's coming, and they're complaining of migraines and they're not pooping. Well, first we need to make sure we address that before moving forward. But I mean, as far as symptoms that people could be complaining of when they come to me, again, it's vast. It could be migraines, it could be insomnia, abdominal pain, diarrhea, rash, burnt out, just, exhausted, flatlined, food sensitivities, ADHD, anxiety, depression, joint pain, menopausal symptoms. I see just about everything currently.
I could imagine. Well, there's a lot of help needed out there. And just to kind of give people a little bit of a framework for what is healthy. So from a sleep perspective, what would you suggest? Like how many, what's an average bowel movement process? And then the sugar throughout the day, what does that look like? Is that times of extreme exhaustion, like the after lunch crash, just to kind of give people bandwidth to understand that within?
For sure. Yeah. For sleep, I would aim for 7 to 8 hours kind of minimum of ideally uninterrupted sleep a night. And I did a post recently of like the sleep non-negotiables that people can refer back to. And then bowel movements once a day, like 1 to 3 times a day really is normal. And you want them to be, not super loose, but not diarrhea. And then blood sugar regulation. You may notice that you're really irritable, or you're really tired, or you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're wired. Those can all be signs that your blood sugar is dysregulated. And you can get even just little glucometers off of Amazon to track your blood sugar throughout the day. But a really good way to balance your blood sugar is to try to eat a good source of fat, fiber, and protein with each meal or snack, and that will help balance your blood sugar. So for example, my son loves fruit, and he would eat fruit all day, which most people would be like, that's great. But fruit does have a lot of sugar. So, he eats an apple, his blood sugar is going to go up real quick, and then it's going to come right back down. If he pairs that, say, with peanut butter or a handful of nuts, it's going to cause a more stable blood sugar reaction, so that he's not hangry 20 minutes later asking for a banana, chasing that high.
And those are the small changes too, right?
Yeah.
It's the awareness. So you're not saying cut out or change or completely. It's just like do it slightly different.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing too that I also really stress is I mean, I could recommend 25 things to, you or the next person, but that's not helpful. There's literally a part in your brain, the amygdala, your fear center, that if you try to do too much too fast, it's like, no, I'm comfortable being miserable. Let's not rock the boat. So by making these 1 degree turns cumulatively and over time, it really can make a huge impact.
Great. Well, what do you have for the audience out there, just as kind of your closing advice from getting yourself to healthy or whatever you're doing? And I'll share your links here in the comments section, but feel free to tell us a little bit about what you have going on with your business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I'll say is I have a huge amount of respect for physicians because I know how hard that they work. And my experience being in the field, that the system is just broken. There's way too much stress put on them to expect to know everything, which in turn puts a lot of pressure on the patient, because then they're playing Dr. Google and they're feeling overwhelmed and not heard. So that's where I come in to step in the middle and really just provide that education and that nutritional and lifestyle support that they're not getting otherwise. So yes, if you or someone are feeling that you're not up to your par and not feeling well, just knowing that there is another way. And if you're feeling frustrated, again, or overwhelmed with the medical system, that's what I'm here for. So I would love to be able to help you and guide you through this process and getting you back to your best self, because really you deserve it. And I know I've heard so many people are just so tired or sick and, oh, well, I'm just getting old. That's really not a valid excuse. You should still be able to enjoy your life and feel well.
Yeah. And to the listeners out there, you can work online and remote with anyone, anywhere in the country?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, COVID. Yep. So I am doing virtual consults around the world.
That's wonderful. And do you interface with your clients' physicians if needed?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly when it comes to labs too. So I can order labs through a third party. Generally, insurance doesn't cover it, which, side note, I also don't accept insurance. And that enables me to be able to provide the best care and not have to check their boxes or play within their square. So generally, I'm doing contact with their providers regarding labs and requesting labs that I feel will best support their care. And generally they're agreeable to that. They more so than the patient just showing up with a list of labs that, I said that I wanted. So yeah, I'm super open to communicating with them, because overall I'm there to support the mutual client or patient, and I want what's best for them. So I'm not trying to say that the physician is wrong or do anything behind their back. I'm there for them, really.
Yeah, it's a beautiful collaboration, actually, because there's prevention and maintenance, and then emergency and correction. Physicians do have a great place and a great skill set and resources, but it's also at a certain time. So I love the collaboration you're bringing with that. And it's really, as you mentioned, it's for the patient's best interests. So, well, good, Stephanie. I appreciate not only your friendship, but I love watching what you're creating. I wish you all the best here. And if you want to reach out to Stephanie, please check out the links in the product in the comments below. You can find her online. You can find her not only on the web, but on social media. And thanks again for the time here, Stephanie, and look forward to seeing you and Ryan in the near future.
Yes, thank you again so much.
Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button right now. Stay tuned and check out the channel for other interesting and informative videos.